Stage 4. A nearby military hangar provides a makeshift lab for the growing team of forensic investigators. Among them are representatives from the American NTSB, Boeing, Swissair, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Pieces of Swissair 111 arrive by the truckload. They are organized into various categories for analysis. Soon the hangar is stacked to capacity with the biggest jigsaw puzzle in the TSB's history. How did a seemingly small cockpit fire suddenly turn to catastrophe? The team sorts through nearly 250 kilometers of wiring retrieved from the wreckage of Swissair 111. Here, the first real clue, evidence of fire caused by electrical arcing. Scorch marks on metal reveal that the source of the fire was in the back of the cockpit, directly behind First Officer Lowe. An examination of the aircraft's wiring plans leads investigators to a likely suspect: the entertainment system in first class.
The system had some major deficiencies. It was getting very hot. It drew a lot of power. And thereby, for example, raising the cabin temperature considerably, because it was always running. They did not install a simple off switch, nor did they install appropriate cooling systems to cool the system down.
The TSB's investigators finally think they have the breakthrough they've been seeking. When Captain Zimmerman threw the cabin bus switch, all power to the cabin should have been turned off, but the entertainment system remained on, overheating.
If you had asked most pilots, they would say, well, if I push the cabin bus switch, it's going to turn off the things behind the cockpit. It's going to isolate that electrically for me so that I don't have to worry about that, and that I can just concentrate on those things that might affect me flying the airplane. Well, as it turns out, that this switch was kind of bypassed in this case for this IFIN, or entertainment system.
Swissair immediately disables the entertainment system on the rest of its fleet. But the TSB concludes that the mystery is not solved.
By the time that cabin switch was turned off, the fire was well underway, and so that had no real bearing on the initiation or propagation of the fire in the Swissair 111 aircraft.
Investigators determined that the problem with the entertainment system alone could not have brought down Swissair 111. The search for answers must continue. Stage 5. The TSB decides to reconstruct the MD-11 from the wreckage. A wireframe mock-up they call the jig provides a spine for placing tiny pieces back where they once belonged. The reconstruction reveals that the hidden fire spread from the cockpit back into the first-class galleys. Some metal showed heat damage from temperatures as high as 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. As the investigation continues, some argue that the actions of the pilots may have contributed to the disaster. Some experts charge that Zimmerman and Lowe's by-the-book approach may have cost them their lives.
Swissair 111 was asking internally.
Some operators emphasized in a very early stage, land as soon as possible, and then if you have time, go into the checklist. Others said, here's the checklist, and at the end of the checklist, if that doesn't help, then land as soon as possible. Pretty contradictory to basic flying instructions, where student pilots learn at a very early stage that whenever you have smoke, you have a fire, and fire means land as soon as possible.
Emergency light switch on. Emergency light switch on.
Unfortunately, in this case, the way the checklist was written, it didn't identify that now start towards the divert. It started more on, let's try to see if we can solve the problem. And so now all of a sudden you're taking on a problem that just kind of crept up on you. You weren't expecting it.
We're going to need more than 30 miles.
But the TSB considers the timeline. Investigators determined that Swissair 111 would not have made Halifax Airport under any circumstances. There just wasn't enough time.
In our calculation, we showed that starting at the ideal descent point from 33,000 feet, which was at about 10:14 p.m. that night, it would take some 13 minutes to get the airplane onto the ground, which would take us to 10:27 p.m. By 10:24, the systems in the aircraft were starting to deteriorate. So we believe that under these circumstances, the crew would not have been able to successfully land the airplane under those conditions with the amount of time that they had.
Whatever caused the fire on Swissair, it happened at a lethal speed. The mystery lingers. A year passes. Then another ambitious operation begins. The TSB hires a sophisticated Dutch salvage ship, Queen of the Netherlands. The vessel is equipped with a gigantic vacuum system, capable of dredging even the tiniest pieces of Swissair 111 from the ocean floor. A mixture of seawater, silt, and aircraft are pumped into the ship's central hold. This cargo is then pumped into a specially constructed reservoir on shore nearby. When the gushing water drains away, investigators find another 1 million pieces of the aircraft. Any one of them may hold the clue to what caused the catastrophic fire. The tedious sorting once again resumes and goes on for weeks. Finally, after 15 months, they find what they've been seeking: one faulty wire.
We looked at all of the possible sources of heat that might start a fire in that area. And in this instance, we did discover a wire that arced in that way. And right next to it was some very flammable material called metallized polyethylene terephthalate covering material that covers the insulation blankets.
The insulation blankets which line the MD-11 are common on commercial airlines worldwide. They have passed the industry's flammability tests, which require materials to self-extinguish after a reasonable period of time. The investigation takes an abrupt turn. Instead of seeking the cause of the fire, the TSB now focuses on the flammable materials that fueled it.
This thermal-acoustical material that was in this aircraft was very flammable. Even though it passed a test, it does sustain and it does propagate flame. So this investigation did focus on the flammability of materials and the requirement to reassess the criteria that is used to certify materials, not just thermal-acoustical insulation blanket material, but also other materials that goes into aircraft, much of it in hidden areas.
Now they have their answer. A wire arced in a closed space behind the cockpit. The arc ignited the insulation, which in turn lit other materials, such as foams and plastics. The pilots could not sense how quickly the fire intensified, but 14 minutes after they declared pan, 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 the fire disabled all electronics in the cockpit. The black boxes went dead. Forensic examination also helped shed light on the desperate final minutes in the cockpit. Lowe was in his seat. Captain Zimmerman